Hey kids, do you like wrestling? Well, we like wrestling too. We are Shake Them Ropes here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Myself and Chris Novembrino kind of doing a lazy river of wrestling criticism, going through the news and whatever happened in stateside television wrestling. And also, you know what? Sometimes we just like to watch old stuff and talk about that too. Love for you to give us a listen. If you haven't already, we are Shake Them Ropes here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Good, the Bad, and the Hungee. You may wonder why you're going to have two introductions this episode. That's because there was something we didn't get to talk to in our conversation this week that I wanted to touch on before we send this episode out. Tyler and I were blessed to have Mike Spears on as our guest to talk about Grand Slam Australia, which was a pretty good show. We'll get into that more, obviously, as well as the releases of Ricky Starks, Miro, Malakai Black, and I'm going to mess this one up. It's always the wrong one. Bear Boulder. Yes, Bear Boulder is the one that was released for the domestic violence accusations slash charges. You can listen to that in a little bit. I am talking to you right now because I wanted to discuss the Observer Awards. We did not get to that last night. And then we had to talk with Mike, or I had to talk with Mike about his obsession with GLEAT, which is frankly disturbing, and I hope he gets home. But seriously, I wanted to go over the results of the Observer Newsletter Awards, Wrestling Observer Newsletter Awards. If you are not familiar, somehow, this is the 45th year of the voting. The voting is done by subscribers to the Wrestling Observer Newsletter. It is not Dave Meltzer's personal awards. It is not something that he makes up. He created the awards, people vote. So, if you see anyone complaining about Dave Meltzer's picks, you can just know that they are silly and don't know what they're talking about. So let's start with the Lou Thesz / Ric Flair Award, aka Wrestler of the Year, essentially MVP. And that went to Cody Rhodes by a pretty large margin over Will Ospreay. Bryan Danielson was third, Mystico fourth, Swerve Strickland fifth. And the rest of the top 10, including a tie for 10th, was Zack Sabre Jr. 6th, Roman Reigns 7th, Sauri 8th, Gunther 9th, and 10th was a tie between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre, which was appropriate given their feud. This is supposed to be an award that values drawing and in-ring ability equally, and I think this was a very difficult year this year because the top, in my mind, three candidates were Cody Rhodes, Will Ospreay, and Mystico. I think Bryan Danielson, had a similar case to Ospreay, but honestly, just a little weaker. So I think he'd be my fourth place pick. Given all that, a lot of the voters gave Cody credit for the success of WWE this past year. And it's undoubted that Cody, among full-time guys, is the most active, I guess, or most over, I should say, of them. Obviously, would it compare to The Rock or to Roman? Well, he might compare to Roman Reigns. I probably should say. Take a second here to pull something up. Okay, I found my pal. All right, so in my opinion, Mystico should have won this because I think he had the best combination of in-ring performance and drawing ability. I think he is essential to CML's success. I think he's obviously their biggest star and their biggest draw. I think anyone who just says that CMLL gets Taurus kind of underrates the importance of Mystico. It's clear that whenever he's in a big match that they draw better than when he isn't. So I think he had the best combination of the two attributes this award is looking for. Cody, I thought, had a okay in ring year. Now I'm saying this as a guy that didn't watch CMLL, so I can't really personally judge Mystico's abilities this year, but I know that he did well in the FSM 50. I could tell what he did with drawing numbers for CMLL, and I just think he had the best combination. So I think, of those three, I think it's pretty clear Mystico should have won the award. I think that there's a continual flaw with the voting base for these awards. And my biggest complaint is that anything that isn't WWE, AEW, or New Japan gets more or less ignored. Um, they just don't know ball enough, frankly, outside of the big three. You can say that that's just a flaw with the voter base, and I think it is. Or you could just say that, they're prioritizing the biggest companies, which you can point to as well. But, CMLL is not a small company. They're probably the fourth biggest in the world. Uh, we're not talking about, feel free to insert, clear third tier company here. So that's kind of frustrating to me. I know that there are people that were very into Sari or Tam Nakano or Mayo Iwatani, both for Stardom. I just don't think those companies were big enough or the houses were big enough for them to really justify the drawing aspect of it. Um, so yeah, I think that Cody is a reasonable pick, but I think that it was not my pick, and I think that Mystico was shortchanged here. It really should have been a three-man race. Uh, Osprey had a great in-ring year, obviously. We'll get to that shortly, but drawing just wasn't there, and I get why people did not vote for him for that. I think he probably was a better draw than Cody was a worker, but WWE had the better year than AEW, I think, by pretty much any business metric, so I get it. We get to most outstanding wrestler, which is best in ring. Will Ospreay won that going away. I think that was pretty obviously the correct call. My top three was Ospreay, then Danielson, then Takeshita, which was also the awards top three. Zack Sabre Jr. was fourth, Sauri fifth, Gunter sixth, Swerve Strickland seventh, Mayu Iwatani eighth, Hechicero ninth, and then a tie for 10th. Lot, 10th place ties so far. CM Punk and Cody Rhodes. I think that those two were a little silly just because, Punk barely wrestled any. And Cody, I think, had a lot of like 3.5 star level matches and not a lot of 4.5 stars. And I think that's a big difference. Um, I also was underwhelmed by Guterres gear, not because of his ability, but because he just did not have a lot of high quality output because of WWE issues. Which brings me to Tag Team of the Year, which was won narrowly by the Young Bucks by a margin of 129 points. Nathan Frazier and Axiom finished second. Third was FTR. Fourth, Sting and Darby. Allen, fifth, June and Ray Saito. Sixth, Hazuki and Kaguma from Stardom. Seventh was Dragon Kid and Naruki Doi from Dragon Gate. Eighth was Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley. Ninth, the Outrunners, and 10th, Kevin Q and Dominic Guarini. 12 people voted the Outrunners for first place for this award. You are very silly people. Uh, I voted June and Ray Saito first place. I thought that, my approach to this was similar to the Fez Flare, where you have to consider in ring and you have to consider drawing power. And I think there was essentially two teams that showed any kind of drawing power this year. The Young Bucks, because they were in the Sting retirement match. And yes, that was primarily on Sting, but, they were foils to him, and that was the highlight of their year. So I think they deserve some level of credit for that. And then the Saitos. The Saitos are genuine draws in Japan. They have boosted All Japan status. They're huge stars. There were photos from the December show, in particular, I recall seeing of like this massive line for merchandise for them. They have a TV show. They've just put out an album like it's 1983 or something. Um, I think it was obvious. Now, I'm not as big of a fan of their in ring as the Bucks, FTR, or Axiom and Frazier, but I think that if you're weighing the two things equally, I think that the massive advantage they have is draws outweighs anything. The kind of shortcoming that I had for them, like I had them like the 80th ish best act in the world or something along those lines as far as an in ring performer from my FSM prep. Um, and I think that was more meaningful than the Bucks being, like the 15th best in-ring act, I think it was, somewhere around there, and, like one good house. Or Axiom and Frazier being a very solid tag team and like the 40th best in-ring act in the world to me, with no drawing power. Or FTR. So I put the Bucks second, FTR third. I thought FTR had a better in-ring year than Axiom and Frazier, even if FTR was somewhat directionless. When they did work, it was very good. Promotion of the year, I took this as a creative category. What I thought was best, um, rather than, I don't see the point of voting for this as a purely who made the most money thing because I don't care about that. If that's what Dave wants, then he can just treat it like the best box office and just go full blur, numbers say blah. So I don't care about that. I voted for what I think was the most accomplished promotion as a year over year improvement. And so I've said, or at least as a punching above their weight, I should say. So I had CML first. I had Deadlock Pro second, which did not even finish in the table. I think that their improvement into a meaningful independent promotion is very impressive and that they deserve kudos for that. And then I had New Japan third because I think they did a very good job of building their next generation of stars and everything. So that's my stance with them. I didn't vote for WWE or AEW. WWE is not for me. AEW had a very frustrating year despite a great in-ring year product. Best on interviews, I didn't even vote in that one. Drew McIntyre won, then The Rock, then Adam Page. Whatever. Um, Match of the year, it went, best weekly TV show. I think I also skipped that because I would have voted basically for AEW shows, and I thought that was bullshit. But Dynamite won massively over SmackDown and Raw. But of course, WWE is the best promotion of the year. Match of the year, Osprey and Danielson, April 21st, one going away. That's an absolutely massive, like, we're talking almost 2,400 point margin between first and second. Uh, that was my pick for match of the year. Second went to Danielson versus Strickland at All in London. I didn't have that on my ballot. Third was Sting and Darby versus the Bucks in Greensboro. Sting's retirement match. That was my third place pick. Second for me was Takeshita and Osprey on March 3rd. Looks like that got seventh. I thought it was a fantastic match. The rest of the top finishers, fourth place, Danielson and Sabre in Japan on February. Fifth was CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre for WWE in, I think, the Hell in the Cell match. Then Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns at Philadelphia for WrestleMania. I thought, both of those didn't really, as someone that watched a lot of stuff, neither of those really came close to even consideration from me. And so we get into the category B awards. I don't care about the MMA ones. If you want to hear someone talk about those, you can go somewhere else. I don't give a damn. U.S. Canada MVP went to Cody Rhodes. Makes sense. I voted Osprey just because, screw it. The Japanese MVP, which has been named after Koichi Yoshizawa. Is that a new thing? I think. Wow. Cool. Good for him. That was, of course, a Japanese historian that passed away in 2023. Zack Sabre Jr. won that going away. Makes sense. Naito second. Sorry, third. Uh, Seems reasonable to me. There 41 people that voted Konosuke Takeshita. You just don't have to vote in every category if you don't have a good idea. Just so you know. Mexico MVP. That went to Mystico by a huge margin. The correct pick. By everything I can tell. Hechicero second. Mascara Dorada third. Fourth place with 12 votes, Hijo del Vikingo. 12 of you do not know what you're doing. Europe MVP, Michael Oku, and then Luke Jacobs, and then Zack Sabre Jr., Will Ospreay. I know both Zack and Ospreay worked there a little bit, but let's be real. Hodge, I didn't vote in that category. I just didn't watch any Euro stuff this past year. Hodge, non-heavyweight MVP, which I think is a category Dave needs to put a little clarification in. I voted Yamato. I think he was more meaningful for Dragon Gate than anyone else. Darby won it going away. I think Darby wasn't really around that much to the point that he should have got consideration for the award. He missed probably maybe not half the year, but like a third of it. I mean, Women's Wrestling MVP, Sari won narrowly 10 points over Rhea Ripley. and then Toni Storm was a close third. Mercedes Moné fourth, and then Mayu Iwatani a distant fifth. Um, I'm glad Sari won this; she deserved it. Um, again, the Ripley, Storm, and even Monet votes, I strongly disagree with those. I think this is just people not knowing ball, not being aware of what's going on in the world beyond like the two major U.S. promotions, and I think that sucks. Feud of the year, Punk and Drew McIntyre won by 15 points over Adam Page and Swerve Strickland. This is again, yeah, what you gonna do? Friendship bracelet puts asses in seats, right? Most improved wrestler went to Kyle Fletcher. I think that's silly because he was improved last year. He just got a better push this year. So again, I think that's a wrong pick. I was torn between Gabe Kidd and Yota Tsuji. I picked Yota Tsuji, finished way down ballot. Harley Cameron second. I'm not entirely sure that she really improved. I think she just finally got exposure, finally got time. David Finley third. I think that was actually a good pick. Gabe Kidd fourth. I think that was a good pick. George Strickland fifth. I mean, his 2024 was very similar to his 2023. I think as far as ability and performance. Mariah May sixth, buddy. I can't agree with that. Commander was seventh. He just wasn't around enough. Eight, Liv Morgan. Nine, Nia Jax. And 10th, Mai Sakurai. I can't comment on that one. Most charismatic, I voted for Kento Miyahara. It was won by The Rock going away. I don't know that I'd really consider The Rock for this award just by like not being around, but hey. Best technical wrestler, I voted Bryan Danielson. Zack Sabre Jr. won it by 210 points or 220. No problem there. Nice to see Daniel Makabe get 15 votes. Definitely no problem there. Best brawler, I voted Shingo, who finished ninth. Adam Page won the award easily over Tomohiro Ishii and then Gabe Kidd. Sure. Best flyer, Osprey won it. I don't know if I'd even vote for him as a flyer, really. I mean, I think he's obviously one of the best wrestlers in the world, but it's not like we're talking best of the Super Junior Osprey. So, that's a little. So, like, Commander got votes, but, like, he was barely around. And then Mascara Dorado, who probably should have won it. I voted Ricochet because I thought of all the wrestlers I watched that were high flyers, he was the best. Most overrated, Nia Jax. Again, as a reminder, this is most overpushed. Um, I have no real thoughts on her. Solo Sikoa was second, which seemed like a pretty good pick. I didn't watch any of his stuff, though. Frankly, I was just watching the highlight matches for WWE. My pick was Mariah May. I know that there will be some people that very disagree with that, very much disagree with that, but I thought she under-delivered a lot of the year, and I did not enjoy the Tony or the Tony May storyline. Most underrated, Takeshita won by 3 points over Chad Gable. Beast Mortos was third. I think those were all reasonable picks. Mine was Bianca Belair. She's such an obvious talent that to not push her harder is bizarre to me. Rookie of the Year went to Javon Evans of NXT by a large margin. Seems reasonable. I voted Bozilla. I didn't think this was a strong year for rookies. Just not a lot of people that really blew me away that I watched. Some people did not like that Javon Evans was eligible because he's been wrestling for, I think, 7 years. I would push back that he started when he was 13 and did not leave the state of North Carolina for like 4 or 5 years, if I recall correctly. So, I mean, are we really going to count that against him? That seems silly. Best non-wrestler, Paul Heyman won. Giles McGee. Don Callis second. Prince Nana third. I voted Nana. Whatever. I don't have a strong take on that. Best television announcer, Nigel McGuinness won. My pick was Chris Charlton, who finished at sixth place. Worst television announcer went to Booker T by a large margin. The correct call. I have rarely ever seen such a bad announcer. One more award, then I'll talk about, and then I'll wrap this up. Skipping some other awards. Most disgusting promotional tactic. I'm just going to go through the top 10. 10th place, Netflix promoting Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul, I assume because I think they said Mike Tyson has Parkinson's. It's probably not good to box when you have Parkinson's. Eighth place was a tie between WWE's silence on Lee Fitting. He was accused of some pretty heinous sexual activity. I should probably say sexual harassment type stuff rather than activity. Eight, and then that was tied with Paul Levesque saying he didn't read the Janelle Grant lawsuit and then acted like it was a great week for the company. Seventh was WWE having their women do a swimwear photo shoot in Saudi Arabia as part of their propaganda. I think that kind of falls under the Saudi Arabia relationship, but hey. Six, WWE talking about sellouts and record gates. I think that's a little silly. If your company is doing big business, I think you should brag about it. I do think it's very silly that they would trot people out in front of the crowds and be like, you paid the most money of anyone ever in the history of wrestling, and then the crowd would cheer. Like, I don't know, man. I don't think I'd be cheering that. I feel like, well, why don't I pay less? But that's just me. Fifth, WWE whitewashing Vince McMahon from history rather than addressing the culture in the company. It's interesting. Fourth, UFC bringing Donald Trump to shows as a hero. All right, then our top three. And I'm going to reference the David Vixen's fan post about this. One of these things is not like the others. Can you figure it out? Third place went to AEW for airing the CM Punk fight footage. Second was WWE booking Liv Morgan sending photos to Dominic Mysterio via text, similar to what was described in the Janelle Grant lawsuit. I think the storyline was a little bit like Dominic was showing off Liv's nudes to other people, if I recall correctly, which happened, I think, like the same week as a major filing on the Janelle Grant lawsuit, without any kind of prior, teasing of that. So, and then number one was WWE and TKO's continued relationship with the government of Saudi Arabia. Um, I thought AEW airing the Punk footage was bizarre and stupid. I think it's a hell of a step to go from that to saying it's worse than a lot of other stuff on this list. Uh, I just, as far as a disgusting promotional tactic, I don't know how that qualifies, let alone qualifies over so many other things on this list. Um, it's pretty clear that it was dumb, it didn't benefit them, and they gained nothing from it. But, you talk about all these, just the WWE accusations of sexual abuse around the company and Vince McMahon, and of course the thing with Lee Fitting. Uh, it's bizarre to me how we can even put those in the same group. Even like the Mike Tyson thing, like having a Mike Tyson fight where he apparently has Parkinson's and is boxing is far worse to me than like a goofy idea. That's just I just don't get it. Worst television show, AEW Rampage. I mean, if that's like that Rampage was just like a 5 out of 10 show where people wrestled like okay matches. To act like that's the worst television show just seems bizarre to me. But also, worst promotion of the year, NWA won over AAA, and then it was by 21 points. It was a close one. WWE, AEW third and fourth, and then PFL fifth. Um, Shout out the MMA voters who continue to like cling on to that for these awards. Um, I think this is largely reputational. We'll talk about GLEAT some here in a little bit, but I think that would, yeah, that would be. I just think those two companies were at the top because of reputation more than anything. They really did earn them this year. Like AAA was very dumb, and NWA was probably dumb, but like who? I don't even think 290 people that vote on this watched it. So you know. No, I do think AAA was pretty deserving. I mean, it caused Cubs to have a breakdown while previewing one of their shows. Um, yeah, so we have all these awards of like best matches, best shows with AEW won, and best TV, which was Dynamite, and then we get to best booker, Paul Levesque, best promoter, at Con. Okay, okay. Um, One last thing, actually, I said that 3 times now, but I see where best gimmick and worst gimmick are here. Tony Storm won best gimmick, worst gimmick went to the Learning Tree, but Tony Storm finished fifth. And people acting like, oh, that's insane. How could people think that? I mean, we're talking about 38 people voting for worst gimmick disagreeing with the majority. And I was one of the Tony Storm voters. I just hate this timeless, I hate the amnesia stuff specifically. That was really dumb. My best gimmick was Swerve Strickland. All right, that's it for the Observer Award rundown, I think, from me. Give me a second. We'll get the rest of the show rolling. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Check out Tyler's Vikings Wire. Listen to Open the Voice Gate. Mike Spears will plug his info at the very end of the episode. And I'm on Blue Sky, but I barely use it. So, just leave me alone. Hope you all have a great day. We'll be back, I believe, around the 28th. Got some stuff to take care of. Going to be a busy week for me. So, hope you all are taking care. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
I pushed the button. Okay. Tyler, take us in.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to another episode of The Good, the Bad, and the Hungee here on the Voice of Wrestling Podcasting Network. My name is Tyler Fornes, and with me, as always, is Fred, who went on a date to Waffle House on Valentine's Day, Moreland. I am jealous of you,
right.
sir. That is one of the coolest things I've ever heard in my life, because Valentine's Day is an evil corporate holiday that's absolute bullshit, and Waffle House is a perfect counter to that.
And then your wife buried me 6 feet under when she saw the photo.
You know what's funny about that? She actually agreed to do a Waffle House Valentine's Day if we ever move down south. So I think I won.
Well, this came after she said he looks like a wrestling nerd, and how dare she make an accurate statement like that?
I wasn't going to put that on air, but I'm glad you did, because it's funny. And with us today is one of my favorite people, host of Open the Voice Gate and the former host of Everything Elite here on this glorious podcast network. He is Iron Mike Spears. How are you, sir?
Hey, thanks so much for having me. And Fred, I definitely think the Waffle House play for Valentine's Day, because you can get a dessert there. Like you get your waffles, your dessert, and that nothing more to true love other than smothered hash browns. Like I'm all aboard on that.
If it's a special Valentine's Day menu at certain locations, and this one had a prefix menu with, I believe it was, you could get a steak, triple hash brown as you like it. Your choice of, you get to share a slice of pie with your partner, and your choice of, I think it's steak or pork chops actually, or I think maybe an omelet. But yeah, it was actually like pretty good. It's not my preferred Waffle House in town. If you live south and you do the exploration, then you figure out what the good Waffle Houses are. This was like a middle of the road Waffle House. But still, it was a nice, nice time. And yeah, I actually do recommend the Waffle House Valentine's Day experience to anyone that is on the fence about it.
I'm intrigued by like the pie that they would have at a Waffle House, because at least in the ones around Greenville and South Carolina, you're absolutely right. We have the rankings, and I had about 5, and you rotate through, and you know which one's not the one to go to on Sunday, and which one's the one that you can go to on Sunday because it's far enough away from the churches and all of that, and which one has the fights. You figure it out there, but I've never really put it up for what kind of pastry you might be getting, because in that case, you might want to go to the church one, because you would think that you would have the family presence that would have a better slice of pie than the one that you go to because you want to see at 2 a.m. What kind of fights break out.
Yeah, this one, I think it was like a Sara Lee chocolate pie that
nice.
was mostly, but not entirely thought out.
Hey, you know what? Good for them thinking of the calorie conscious, because let me tell you, after I ate Waffle House, I would probably need something with low calories to get it all down.
If you want to have a great breakfast and then just ruin your next 8 hours, just go there and get the hash browns all the way. I would advise not doing both gravy and chili at the same time, because I think that makes you a heathen. But once you do that, 1, it is delicious, and then 2, you'll feel for at least 4 hours like you should die.
Yeah,
that would be good.
I feel like the real judge of someone is when you take them to Waffle House and you see what they do with chili and gravy. Because there was a time that I was out like back in my younger days, and we were out, and there were like new people, and we're like, okay, like where we want to go eat after going to the show? Okay, we're gonna go to Waffle House. And then I just sat there, like my mouth agape as someone did a triple with gravy, chili. Like that's what triggered me when you brought both of those. Yeah. Capped, peppered, and smothered. And I just was like, I don't like. I'm good. I'm good at that day. I'm ready to go home because like the wreckage that you just put yourself through, like for in about 8 hours, you're just not going to love being alive. And you really start learning something about someone by their hash browns order.
I think that, like, personally, I think the chili and the gravy act like matter and antimatter, and that when they touch mainly in your stomach, they just cause destruction. The last time I did my triple hash brown bullshit, I went in, I ordered it, I asked for it all the way. I always forget because it's like once a year, because I'm actively trying not to die before 50. And I asked for it all the way, and the waitress very kindly was like, "Now, you don't want both gravy and chili, do you?" So the people that work there are trying to keep you from doing this.
They would know. They would know.
Yeah.
Gosh, I've never had the gravy or the chili because all my Waffle House experiences have come before 10 a.m. So
that's what I do. I do it for breakfast. I do when I've done it. I do it at like 9 a.m. like a real freak.
I might be a little bit more deviant. Most of my times, 11 to 1 p.m. I'm going in for lunch because I feel like the bacon and egg Texas melt is like a perfect like late morning sandwich. So I don't even like try to go for the 2 a.m. thing. I'm going for like when it's just the truckers are stopping for a cup of coffee is when I want to go to the Waffle House.
Oh, that's good to know. This is great information for me.
Yeah.
Denny's is good, but it ain't Waffle House.
Hey, you are limited by your regional, aspects, right?
Yeah. And like Denny's, like the wild thing about South Carolina, Denny's headquarters was in Spartanburg, and they had their test kitchen there. But no one like ever like talked about going to it. It felt like that you would send like a bunch of restaurant execs in the middle of South Carolina and say, "Hey, this is where our headquarters is, and we're testing things out here deep in the heart of Waffle House and Chick-fil-A country." It was befuddling. So that's my Denny's axe to grind.
Look at that, Fred. We get breakfast lore on a Sunday evening. This is a wonderful podcast. I love this.
Other Valentine's tips, because I actually had a very good Valentine's, is go to your nearest pinball museum and just play like 3 hours of basically an all-you-can flip pinball buffet, and then go across and down the street to a Hardee's and just get a good fast food burger, and then do the Waffle House dinner.
Speaking of ways to get food poisoning, let's go to Hardee's.
I've never had an issue with Hardee's.
I will say Hardee's has elite buffalo sauce. The buffalo sauce,
the burgers are top tier fast food burgers.
I feel like when they did that merger with Carl's, that was when they kind of figured out, because the thing that at least like Hardee's supposed to have a good breakfast, but they stop at their earliest out of anyone, so you never get that. So what they do, they find Carl's Jr., get great burgers out of that. Like it works out there. Maybe that's where they got the hot sauce from as well.
That would make sense. Speaking of hot sauce, Fred, we should probably dive into the AEW, because the AEW right now is relatively hot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a good couple weeks now. I haven't watched the last Dynamite, and we don't have enough time to talk about it, even if I had. But they did the Texas run. They got their Waffle House and Whataburger, and the crowds were up for it. Crowds have been good, and then they made it to Australia. And as we all know, the biggest news out of Australia would be the ring size. That's what everyone truly cares about when it comes to this discourse. But let's talk about the real big news of the week, which is some releases from AEW. There are 3 of like our long national nightmare is over variety, and the 4th is a pretty awful situation. So Tyler, I'll let you set up which one you want to discuss first.
I think let's start with just the trio, and then we can talk about the final one. Miro, Malakai Black, Ricky Starks, all gone. all expected to be Fed bound. We know the man formerly known as Ricky Starks is currently in NXT. He debuted this past Tuesday, but they aren't saying his name. And what's really interesting is they have a contract signing with him without ever having said his name. Now, you have to have a name to sign a contract. So my guess is WWE believes they can get this figured out by that time, whether it be that AEW still retains the rights to Ricky Starks, or WWE and Ricky Starks are in negotiations for his name to be used for licensing purposes. For whatever that is, that'll be interesting to find out. But Miro hasn't done anything since 2023. Malakai Black was the idea of having Malakai Black rules, but Malakai Black kind of sucks. And you have the Hounds of Hell, who are just better off without him. I don't really have anything more to say. We kind of knew all three of these were coming, and I think the fact that they were released, it was almost like Tony Khan just decided, you know what, I'm sick of just paying these guys to do nothing. I'll let them go.
Like your thoughts on this trio?
Yeah, it's so interesting, like how these three names really kind of came in like on the back of COVID, right? Like you had Ricky Starks come in during like the peak of the Daily's Place era, and then Malakai and Miro kind of towards the end of that, and when they were start getting back on the road. And I feel like when you like look at these like three, I think Miro and Malakai are pretty easy to silo out. Like as you were saying, Tyler, there just was no. Miro has been in Bulgaria for the most part of the last, I guess, 18 months or since the last time we saw him. And it never really felt like that things were working out after that initial TNT title run. Like as much as I thought that like the Best Man and the him and Kip Sabian kind of team was funny. Like it just, you had that one run, and then ever since then he was a headache. So yeah, in true Tony Khan fashion, real relatable millennial avoidant finally deciding like, well, I'm getting out of the continent, I guess, as like my goodbye. I'm gonna like take care of these. Ricky Starks is going to be the interesting one, like, because as you said, the whole situation about his name coming in almost like how Billy Gunn came into Impact, where it's like you all know who he was because then he decided to be like the last outlaw or like something with that. But it seems like to me with him, there was a time, and that time was right around when they were building him up for that MJF title shot, where it felt like, oh, you could very easily see this guy as maybe not like a world champion, but he should be like the people's champion, essentially forever on the chase, like as a babyface. And then after the heel turn and all the situations with that, I feel like he is almost a what if, but it just seems like at the end of the day, the writing was on the wall for him. And yeah, I really can't be, pardon my French, I really can't like give a shit about Malakai Black. Like he has like been like one of the most just there kind of presences. So it's just kind of interesting that like these three go, and then of course Fenix is still in Twitter jail, and we still kind of wait and see when he's finally going to get let out and go where we all expect. And maybe that's kind of the thing, is that now you have two of these guys that are WWE originally, went to AEW after like all the cuts and everything that was happening in COVID, and they work their way kind of back. I mean, it's not a surprise though, I would say, about either Miro or Malakai in that regard.
Yeah, and I'm with you with Malakai. He was good. I always thought he was like his in-ring stuff was good. The whole like everything outside of it, the spooky bullshit, the lore of the mist and all that, like whatever with me. On his own, like he was a guy that had a high floor and a low ceiling. Like everything seemed to live in that like 3 3/4, 4-star range off the top of my head. I'm sure there's stuff that was higher, but just in general, that was kind of the Malakai Black experience. Miro was sad to me because it did feel like that they could have really done something with him, and they opted to not for whatever reasons. Maybe he was too much of a pain in the ass backstage. I don't know. It's really one of those things that like nothing's really solidly come out.
We'll find out in 20 years in a shoot interview.
Or in 6 months on, Chris Van Vliet I don't want to listen to.
Bust it open, baby. Let's go.
But like, it's sad. And Ricky Starks, I think, is the most frustrating one to me because not only can I point to him and say he has the skill to become a main eventer, to be like a really important guy on the show, but it felt like when his whole deal stopped, that before the Big Bill tag team, before that, but even through the Big Bill tag team, it was like you just need to put the gas pedal down and this guy will get more over. And there's at least 2 times I think in his run where it felt like he was like one angle away from being a top guy in the company, and they just were like, meh. And it's kind of like, okay, well, this is dumb. I just kind of hate this whole thing. And then because we do this podcast, it got to the point where I had to, I got conditioned Pavlov style, where like their names came up and I was just like would start twitching because it's the worst discourse because nothing was happening with them. But it was always just they're not there and they're not happy. But this is month 14 of this things being true, and it's just like, well, thank God they're gone. Frankly, in a very selfish way, because I don't have to talk about them for a while, if not never again. And it was like the CM Punk thing, as a co-host of this, where it got froze in place and like nothing was happening, and you're just like praying that they will do something so you can just like stop this wrestling news edging that is the worst thing in the world. Because that leaves all this speculation and people just like making shit up, and it's just like I would rather put my head on the railroad track.
Yeah, and it's like at least like that was one of those situations that as I get further from like week to week AEW coverage, like y'all do, that I think living through it and like seeing this, and we've seen this so many times. Like you bring up CM Punk as like the right example of it, and that really feels like the flashpoint to that. This is a company that, in a lot of ways, at least within discourse, it's Groundhog's Day. Every day it's kind of like that. And then you go to a certain point where it's just like, what are the actual things you can evaluate? What are the actual things you're able to provide critique or be able to discuss in that manner? And it's being so completely just diluted by just, okay, Ricky Starks and is like, it's doing this Chris Van Vliet interview, and then it's not about like the content of the interview. It's all about, oh, he's still on ice, and Tony Khan has not talked to him in 6 months, and it's just like, what are we doing here at that point?
Yeah, and like you mentioned, the relatable millennial thing of like not wanting to talk to someone. I get that, but like at some point, you got to realize what the discourse has become around the company, and you have to shift gears from Groundhog Day to the GIF from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and just grab these guys and yeet them out the door. Just to be done with it.
This has really like shown Bear, like this situation of like these three guys and this happening so many times. Just the fact that Tony Khan in 6 years has refused to find like the right bad cop to do all the dirty work that needs to happen if you're trying to be the self-effacing, popular, I hate to use the phrase, babyface owner, but like trying to be like that figure. You need someone
like, oh, Vince loved my ideas thing, like
right.
That is ideal. That is actually a good thing that Vince McMahon did in his very crappy way of like having someone be the guy that was a dick to everyone, and then your job be like, oh yeah, that sounds great, Malakai. We could probably brainwash me and do that at a WrestleMania. That'd be great.
Yeah,
and we for him to leave and immediately start shit talking him.
Right. Yeah, and it's just like it shows like the situations with the promotion and really how you have this promotion now exists now coming up on year 6, and you have people like the most well-known bad cop in wrestling history, with the exception now, I mean, in recent years of other like actual bad stuff happening. And Jim Ross has worked for you for 6 years. You haven't had him like pull someone aside and be like, guess what, Christopher Daniels, you're the one who's going to be doing all the bad news now, and you're my filter, and you're in a lot of ways, you are the first AD who's just going to get so much shit because the actual director cannot be bothered. And
yes,
I feel like that these three guys are kind of emblematic of that situation playing out time and time again within this promotion.
Yeah, he needs someone to just like not even be a jerk, just put their foot down backstage and be like the guy that will just be like, listen, we're going to use you as a mid-carder. like it or leave it, and just be the person to say that stuff, because Tony Khan clearly either doesn't want to or can't be that person. And it's one of the biggest problems I think with AEW today. A lot of it is like, frankly, that Taz dropped the line in a promo 5 years ago, but it's kind of sloppy shop shit. And I think that that's the biggest problem with AEW, is it leads to these perception issues they have, and it leads to these unhappiness backstage. We went from Jake Hager telling, forget who signed, but there was a story from early in the pandemic where like someone came in and they were like, "Oh, I guess we could fake these tests and just go home." And Jake Hager turned around to him and was like, "We don't do that here. We're all really happy." To Jake Hager posting crazy Tony Khan is George Soros playing on Twitter. Like not everyone's going to be happy all the time. The nature of a wrestler is to be like, well, why am I not the world champion? Why am I not the Gucci of this company?
This is the wildest thing. Like the whole idea of like that this is the one profession that you get people so obsessed with performing the duties of the profession that it causes physical damage and neurological damage and psychological and emotional toll with this. And they're presented a situation to sit at home for 15 months and they go, I hate this because I want to go do my physical and a very
just
dangerous profession. Myself. Yeah. It's the only profession like this in the world.
Yeah. Like even I think football, like if you signed a guy to a 3-year deal and we're just like, okay, just stay home, they'd be like, all right. No.
I'll take that deal. Give me $300,000 to sit my ass at home, Tony Khan.
Yeah. So those are the releases that were pending for what felt like forever since the creation of the universe. The fourth release of the past week, a much less jovial conversation to have about it, which is the release of Bear Boulder, who was arrested on a charge of domestic battery by strangulation of his partner. This happened, I believe, back in January. It took a little bit for this news to break, but he was released in this past week. And if he did do that, fuck him.
Yeah, it's pretty open shut kind of thing, I feel like. And
yeah.
And it's happening like it took so long for us to all know. It happens in the one state that makes all these arrest records completely public too.
Yeah.
So like you had to, there's also like the heinous act and all of that, but also like the idea of hiding it from like someone who is your partner in professionalism for like that. Yeah. And like that sort of thing, especially when you're like Iron Savages. It's not like that you have or any sort of safety whatsoever if you are like if you're a Bear Bronson, like
no, bottom of the card. I mean, yeah, unfortunately, I like them. I like their in-ring ability, and I would have pushed them harder if it was up to me. But I feel bad for Bronson because he's been tied to this for so long, and it's been a really shitty gimmick, frankly. What they've been, the whole like Jack nonsense stuff they've been doing for the past year and a half is essentially jobbers. And now he doesn't even have that. So, I think he's talented. I'd like to see him get a shot as like something on ROH or something, just where you have the TV, or the screen time to spare to him. But you got to think that he's like, oh God.
Yeah.
Professionally.
No. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just a shitty situation all around.
Yeah.
Yes.
But those were the personnel changes of the past week. AEW Grand Slam Australia has happened. We'll get to our review of the show shortly. Financially, I don't think we have an attendance number, but we do know that financially it is I think the fourth highest gate in company history officially, or actually third currently, but All in Texas is believed to be higher, so it's going to be getting pushed down pretty quickly. Ticket prices were high. Now, part of that is that it was originally planned to be a pay-per-view, apparently, and then gestures at everything that AEW did since initially announcing the show, which is not make it clear at all, and then move from a stadium to an arena, and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. I think that it seemed like people were still pretty happy with the show. Again, without getting into the review, just very frustrated about the fact that it was not the pay-per-view that they all assumed, and that Tony Khan once or twice kind of indicated it may have been originally planned to be.
You know what my biggest takeaway on the show was? Each match had an Australian or Australian adjacent talent, and only one of them won, which is very against how AEW has historically handled people going to their hometown or home country. And I found that very interesting because like Tony just does the anti-WWE thing where you go to your hometown, you're the babyface, you win. But here, other than Tony Storm, and you could argue as Banana Peel, I know she's been kind of using the schoolboy or the small package, to win a few matches here leading up. So it had a little bit of credence to it, unlike just a standard roll up. But it felt like a shift in booking philosophy for Tony Khan to have this. And I mean, all the local talent were booked very strong. It was just interesting to me that he kind of went against everything that he's ever done leading up to this point.
I know what you're talking about. I think that there's two kind of separate things that, we're getting dangerously close to just doing the review now, so I guess maybe we could do that. I think there's two things at play here. One, some of these wouldn't really make that much sense for the Aussie, the hometown person, to go over. I'd point specifically to Okada and Buddy as a match where I think, given where they are probably going, having Okada drop it on like a 3-week build to Buddy is probably not what they have planned for that title. Now, in other cases, I think that the company has gotten a little obsessed with getting heat. And it's part of like this slow transformation into like 2017 WWE that I think the company's creative has kind of been undertaking, and to the company's not to their harm, to their detriment is the fancy word I was trying to think of. And I think that a lot of this company is just really focused on, we got to get heat, brother. And I think that's been a lot of the issue with the Death Riders, is it's just all about getting heat constantly, and they never show their ass. And I think that, up and down the card, that's kind of been a focus of the company. And I think it's gotten to the point where it's like, well, can we just see a babyface get over and do something?
And also thinking about the idea of this being like the big coming home show, because like they always like made like a deal in the lead up to it, going like Harley getting the Wrath of Cameron and being able to like go and be on this show, that you had like certain kind of situations where, for at least within the TBS title, it was always very clear, at least I felt like that this was probably going to be the best case scenario of how well can Harley do when you dump her in the deep end, essentially in a title match. I do feel like the getting heat situation, especially as pertains to the Death Riders, and you had a match where I feel like you need to, like, with like the heat with the Death Riders, you have situations where you're not really, it's not just that it not being where the baby faces feel like that they're getting any sort of momentum. It just feels like that conversely, you have situations where the promos are the same thing, and the overall aims are the same things, and you're still choking out people and you're abducting people, and it's just like, at what point are we going to see what the overall master goal of where this is supposed to be leading to? Because at this point, what it seems like is basically John Moxley's group of people who watched whatever that movie was, and Pac hanging out. Romper Stomper, Pac hanging out in his gear, which is like the best part of it, is Pac's just being Pac right now. Like, that's the only change for him, is that it's just a different group of guys he's with. And we're not really reaching a certain point where it's like, if the Death Riders command so much of this show and so much of this control around the title, then all they're doing instead of building this future is just preservation, and it's boring at a certain point. It's just basically throwing scrubs at people until eventually they face John Moxley, and John Moxley beats them, and we go see who's the next person that they're going to beat up and then do the same storyline with, essentially.
Yeah, I think that honestly, that's an issue that is going to hurt Claudio and going to hurt Pac specifically. Like, those were two pretty over upper mid carders that I worry that they've been pushed into this goon role, and they're just going to do so many jobs to build up the guy that John Moxley eventually beats that it's going to cause them damage. But like this show, this Grand Slam show, which I think it had like, was it 3 or 4 segments that were just Death Riders doing stuff, and it's kind of like, maybe we could cut down on this and not have, because it's like, as someone that grew up in the Attitude Era, what I would compare it to was how much the NWO was featured on Nitro, but imagine that, but not over.
Yeah, or like the corporation and like the idea of like those days of like an issue within U.S. pro wrestling has always been the Rudo unit and like how you are able to incorporate them. And we've seen now over 5 months that in a company that used to be very good about their heel lead units, like the Inner Circle and even at times Jericho Appreciation Society and Pinnacle, you just don't have, there's no juice, as the kids say. There's no juice in this.
Yeah, it's very similar, I think, to what they did with the Elite last year. In the presentation of it, of just this kind of very generic heel group that are chicken shits, but will beat people now when they have the numbers advantage. And they always have the numbers advantage because somehow AEW is kind of from a company where everyone has friends to a company where you can only get involved in Angle if you're like listed on the TW sheet. If you're one of the invested parties, like you're booking with a Cornell game. And it's just such a like a backwards movement, and I think that that's part of AEW's issues. But I think that there's a lot of AEW issues right now. But honestly, at the same time, I think this show gave a little bit of optimism. I just hope that they follow up on it correctly. Tyler, run us through the show.
Absolutely. Well, start of the show. First, I think we should talk about the ring, because the ring is obviously creating all kinds of controversy. Personally, I think it's all stupid, but I did find it
so stupid.
I did find it really interesting that the ring was so incredibly small compared to the normal ring. But we also know, having covered this sport for so long, that when you go overseas, oftentimes you rent a local ring.
Right.
It's incredibly difficult to bring a ring yourself overseas, but renting a ring, no problem. But it was a smaller ring, and I think you saw some differences in how these guys were wrestling. We saw Kenny Omega almost botch Rise of the Terminator because of it, because he didn't have that kind of momentum buildup that he usually does. And Buddy Matthews apparently complained in a now deleted tweet that he hurt his ankle during his entrance because of holes in the padding. There's people saying it was 16 by 16. It was 18 by 18. I don't know. That thing looked 12 by 12 to me, but maybe that was just my own eyes and how small the ring was compared to like the space around the ring. But it was smaller, and I thought it impacted the matches, but I still thought it was a good show. It's just interesting how the grifters are attaching to this as the reason why we need to hate AEW today. Everybody borrows rings when you go to certain places. It's not a big deal.
What they should do is they should run the women's title thing back and just promise to debut a new ring in 2 weeks and have it be like 3% bigger.
I wonder how much of it really was given away by the fact that outside of the hard cam, the most you would notice it is really when someone was just, something looked different because of the familiarity of the ring they were working in, which happens a lot. But the one thing that I thought that was that made it really happen was the fact that they kept on using a hard shot that was clearly for their production set that was a 20-foot ring, and that was the issue. If they adapted to it ahead of time, this would not have been a discussion whatsoever, I feel like.
Yeah. I am apparently kind of dumb, which isn't news to anyone that pays attention to me at all. But I didn't really notice if I had not have seen like the discourse before the second half of the show, because I broke it up because I am old. But I watched Omega, the opening tag. It was like ring maybe a little small, but it's mostly like I didn't really think much about it. And then I open up social media the next day, and like apparently a bunch of people were like, "Oh, the ring is so tiny," and I'm like, "Okay, cool."
I noticed it right away. Like it must have been like 2 or 3 minutes into the Omega Osprey match. Like, Omega was taking 2 steps and already on the other side of the ring. Like I get like when you're running the ropes, like 3 steps, a guy like Omega size, and then you're turning around, but he was covering ground incredibly fast. And to me, I'm like, okay, that's really interesting why they have such a smaller ring, but obviously not everybody is going to have a 20x20, which completely fine. I don't really care that much, but I thought it did impact the quality of the matches just a little bit having the smaller ring, because a condensed space, which these guys maybe aren't necessarily used to working. Like, when was the last time a guy like Kenny Omega worked in that small of a ring? Like, just an honest question, not trying to like be derogatory or anything. But you could tell that some of the stuff that they wanted to do in that high impact style of offense was a little limiting. And I think the match could have been better if it was in a bigger ring. Is it a big deal? No. But I did find it interesting that, especially with that match specifically, there's more left on the bone, more so than you would have had in a normal 20x20 ring, because there was just some things that they weren't able to do.
And I feel like there was a moment of that, at least in this match. There was the Poison Rana botch that Kenny goes right after a V trigger and goes for a Dragon Rana on Takesha, and it just very clearly was just a out and out botch where it was very much looked like that Takesha maybe, I mean, I've never taken a Dragon Rana before. It looks like that would be way too physically intensive for someone like me to try to pull off, but it looked like that he was trying to compensate for a smaller ring by already kind of going and starting the whip back for that. And those were like the little things that I don't think it really, maybe it took off, maybe like the final gear in the motor for some of these like high impact sequences. But I really wonder, like with this kind of thing, like, because like you bring up like Kenny Omega, like you're probably talking about when he would like go and did shows with Riho in Singapore. Like that might be how long ago. So we're talking 6 years at this point since he's worked in this. And think about Okada in the same way. Like Okada maybe working like a Ring of Honor show, or Ring of Honor would have borrowed a ring, and Ring of Honor had a smaller ring back in that day. But I mean, there's no real difference between a New Japan ring and an AEW ring size wise. It makes you kind of wonder about those sorts of things, I feel like.
It's one of those discussions, Mike, that I think when you have in a medium like this, where we're, for lack of a better term, because I don't want to make anybody else sound like they're idiots, but they kind of are, we're intelligent people who are very thought-provoking about this. Sure. We don't always agree on pro wrestling. So I find in this medium, it's a really good conversation to have, because there are elements that change when it comes to the world of pro wrestling when you have a different ring. Like we saw, like when TNA had their 6-sided ring, so many things were different. And when you see smaller rings, I know GCW uses a much smaller ring in a lot of their events. It limits you and changes how you are able to kind of utilize your weaponry, your skill set. Well, we see that in sports all the time, especially in like baseball. You go to a different park, you have to play it different. So the fact that they had to play it different here, to me, is just, it's a fascinating element that's going to get overblown, because this space, unfortunately, is filled with really, really bad analysis.
Right. And similarly, like, let's take this ring and use it as a positive. What could you do about this? I was listening actually to Rich Craich doing the tour of territories. I finally like loaded it up as I was doing long work, and it was a Memphis show, and it was talking about a Nick Bockwinkel versus Jerry the King Lawler match, where Nick Bockwinkel lost in the ring, but was pointing out like, hey, don't you know that the referees in Memphis are some of the worst in the world? And the rings in Memphis, the bottom rope is 6 inches higher. So when I had my foot where it's supposed to be, that should have been a rope break. You could have completely played this up as like, in Australia, the rings are smaller and you have to go more face to face, and maybe you're not going to be as reliant on rope running. Or if you're a submission wrestler, maybe you're someone that's not going to go for like an ankle hold, like Kurt Angle, because maybe they'll be able to get to the ropes. Maybe you then go for like the bulldog choke and stuff like this. Like there's ways that this could have been a really kind of cool thing, but like there's no opportunity within the sphere to kind of take this and maybe go like, this felt weird here, but how could this be cool in the future? And there could have been opportunity with that. Or maybe I am just doing the over analysis and starting to huff my farts with that. But I think that you could do certain things with that just because of the world that we live in is just not possible. And that's a shame.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the show. Opening match, Omega and Ospreay against Takeshita and Kyle Fletcher. And I think this was clearly the match of the night. I thought it was like obviously so. I went 4.5 stars on it. I just think it was exactly what it needed to be, which is just a great exhibition. Essentially an exhibition between all guys, because you got the build, but they're obviously going to go to singles matches, and they set that up later in the show, kind of in one case. But I thought it rocked for the most part. I did think Omega had like 2 or 3 spots that he kind of blew, that he was involved with that were blown, which is very uncanny Omega. Like, I think, blaming it on the ring, it makes as much sense as anything else, since his health is otherwise apparently fine. I don't think this is like, we're going to find out that he did a promo that sucked because he was actively dying, like when he originally went away. And yeah, I thought this is just a great match between 4 of the best wrestlers in the world, essentially.
So I have a question for you, Fred, because
Yes.
I think this is really interesting when it comes to Kenny Omega, because as much as we made fun of Malakai Black for his lore, one of the things that Omega's done when he's returned to the company is he has really sold the fact that he's hurt. We're not stupid, and all of the AEW canon is wrestling canon, which to me makes this a little bit more of a murky question, because we saw the match he had in New Japan with Gabe Kidd. That's going to get heavy match of the year votes. But was he selling and trying to sell this idea that he's still rusty and not 100%? And how much of that was, what's going on here? Why is Kenny botching this stuff? Because I do think that there's an interesting discussion to be had there. And it's also a question I don't think we can answer, because it could honestly go either way. And I think that's one of the cool and annoying things about Omega is he
of all the people in the roster, he'd be the most likely to think that was a good idea. Like Daniel Bryan would have done that, but he is currently dead. I think that it's entirely possible that some of those were like 4D chess thinking Kenny Omega, going full galaxy brain and being like, I will mess up this move because it will tell people that I am still recovering from my injury. I don't think any of them really hurt the match to any real meaningful level. I will say that. But of all the guys on the roster, and I mean, look, the Young Bucks were just like in an interview decided to be a good idea to say, well, we had bad matches on purpose, which is some of the most Chris Jericho bullshit I've heard in a while. But I do think it's well within the realm that the decision that Omega decided to botch 1 or 2 of those to try to get that across. But I don't think anything was set up that way either, so I don't fully buy it.
I think that you have him kind of doing that with his stomach work. I think that's kind of where he's tried to put his energy. And I think if you're looking at really he's had 3 matches since he's returned. He's in the Gabe Kidd, that Brian Cage match, which now feels more kind of like maybe was that also him doing like an in-ring physical at the same time, everyone making sure things were okay with that kind of thing. And then now this tag match where like the common thread is that he's constantly going to be working with the idea that he's going to be like Mr. Hippo. Like you hit him in the stomach and he instantly is going to go down and you're going to go with that. And how much of that I feel like when you talk about people who think about wrestling the way that like Omega and Danielson do, could they be doing like, I will blow this one and we'll play this into it? Like we saw some of that within the Gabe Kidd match. And I just don't know how much of that is happening when he's also trying to having the diverticulitis as a focus of a match. I love people working stomach matches. Don't get me wrong. It's just there's a bit about like the idea of punching Kenny Omega and he immediately goes down. That is just such a wild thing to contemplate to me. But I love this. The thing that really kind of stood out to me with this in the closing moments, getting the old, they haven't really had one of these in a long time, but it used to always be the Darby Tope through the ropes out of nowhere, out of frame, into frame. You just suddenly see Darby Allin flying into someone. Instead, you had Ospreay do that in this match. And that was probably one of my favorite moments on the show, if not my favorite moment on the show, just because I feel like that was always such a great thing for them to do that just was so different from like the standard or major American TV wrestling. Like you always have it like framed or changing on bump. But instead you had kind of out of nowhere happen. And I thought that really kind of added to a match. That the thing that got me with this is that it did feel like that exhibition that you would get before they go off and now they have their separate programs. And I really enjoyed it. I was 4.25.
Yeah, I went 4.5. I thought the super finisher of Kenny Omega's One Wing Angel and Will Ospreay doing the Hidden Blade was one of the coolest and most unique things I've seen in pro wrestling in a long ass time.
Yeah, it was great, and I liked it a lot.
What really struck me wasn't just that they created it and that they hit it, was how synchronized it was for a first attempt. How many times did they practice that? Probably maybe once or twice. It's remarkable the ability of these pro wrestlers. And I want to shout out Kyle Fletcher because he was in his home country and he still got booed to oblivion. Like, he has become a megastar in this company, and he deserves a ton of credit for still being able to stay heel.
Fortunately, Busted Open had their fears alleviated, and never have to worry about that ever again.
Listen, if WWE wants to pay me to be co-opted, I take US dollars, thousands of them. Call me.
I would not be that expensive. Just kidding. Anyways, I thought this was a great opener, and honestly, there's some stuff on the card that looked like it could have followed in those footsteps, but unfortunately, we didn't get that. We followed this up with, I believe, the next match was Harley Cameron and Mercedes. And look, I'm not going to bury this match because I thought that Harley did a fantastic job in her performance. I do think that it was okay. I went 2 3/4 on it. I thought it was strongly above average, but I wouldn't go so far as to call it good or anything. I thought it was just like, it was solid.
I'll say this, based on what expectations were, I thought Harley Cameron was incredible.
No, she succeeded.
She held her own, and she's still pretty green. She's over. She's incredibly popular with the fan base. She's got incredible charisma, but the work is starting to catch up to a point where you can realistically give her a semblance of a push. And I think that was my biggest takeaway here. She probably shouldn't have won. I think they made the right decision. We'll kind of see how they end up getting the belt off her, because I think they need to do that at some point. But Harley Cameron was, to me, the biggest storyline coming out of the show, because she showed that she can hang well enough to be pushed in this company.
Yeah.
Yeah. I go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, Harley Cameron's probably my favorite act in the company. At this point, even though the puppet stuff maybe went over, but then she followed it up with her promo on Dynamite that I felt like was her best promo that she's had this entire time. And there's just like, you like see how quickly she has gotten things. And it's even just like I remember like a time where you would like look at someone like match between match, especially when they go against outsized like experience, and you get to see them kind of do those jumps. And I feel like you now have someone in Harley Cameron that I don't think they really have had with some of the other women's wrestlers, frankly, within the promotion. I mean, you compare what Harley as like a act and as a wrestler into like compare her to like a Sky Blue, and I would take Harley Cameron every day.
Oh God,
Yeah,
yes,
you just have someone who at that
Anna
point,
Jay.
Anna Jay, like just like with all of that, I mean, you have a situation now with someone that when I look at the match, and I was 2 3/4 as well, I largely co-sign with what all you're saying there. It just you look at someone like that and you're like, okay, now you keep on finding places for Harley Cameron until you're ready to go full bore for her. And with the news that they're going to go back to Australia next year, like, why not just keep on trucking with her like this? And you kind of count this like as like the wrestling checklist for like a prospect. And you go like, okay, I talk about this with the case all the time. Like, okay, if someone had it's time for their first time to have to open the Dream Gate, and it's time for them to have their first match, but to see how they do with that. And it's not just that she like checked the box for that and you're able to go down and continue. You have someone there that she comes out of this, and I would say it's not that the failings and the things that didn't make the match like be exceptional were not all because of her. Like, it was just solely like she did all the first. She put her best foot forward there. I think the one conversation that could be had is maybe with someone like Mercedes, you're going a little ambitious, and maybe this was a bit too much ambitious of a match on her side. I guess that's kind of the way I come down on that.
Yeah, I do think something I heard on the flagship review of the show that I agree with is I don't think they did a great job at getting over a Harley is going to win this segment. I feel like that was kind of the weakest point of the match because, she had some roll-ups, but it didn't feel like it got to that level where like the crowd really bid on it. And if they had done that, like, I think it would have drastically improved the quality of the match. But even so, like, the work was solid. Harley didn't mess anything up. I know some people are down on the puppet thing, but frankly, I love Mick Foley. So how can I be out here like, late 90s Mick Foley was awesome, and then turn around and say that hitting someone with a puppet is bad? Like, that just, I can't do that. It worked within the realm of the match, the structure of it, and the story and everything. And also, anyone that thinks that like if you got hit by someone with a puppet on their hand and it would not hurt is like just crazy about made up things for kayfabe. So
yeah, I don't know, but I'm excited to see Monet versus Momo. I think that'll be good.
Yeah, it's nice to see. Like, apparently, I missed Stardom last year, but it seems like Momo has turned her career around after kind of a dull 2023. So I think that those two could have a really good match.
Yeah.
Momo's better than Yuka Sakazaki at this point in time, and that was, I think that was just kind of a weird set of circumstances, I guess, where you hit like the second percentile match quality if you were to run that 100 times or something. So.
Yeah, and they had a great match last year, like Mercedes and Momo.
Yeah, they did.
So I'm really stoked for that. I mean, Momo Watanabe is like the one person who fell between the cracks in the Bushiroad takeover that it really feels like that she could have been something more, but now back on track, exactly as you're saying. And I'm intrigued to see like where they do that match. And if it's going to be something they held out for Revolution, or if it's going to be situationally for when they're in Vegas in a few weeks as well. So there's a lot of interesting situations with that.
Yeah. But good performance by Harley. Good by her. Excited to see where they go with her going forward. Hopefully they do not send her to the Chris Statlander / Willow Nightingale, holding pattern prison that they occasionally get sent off to, because all three of them should be featured every week. Next up was the Brisbane Brawl between Cope, Jesus Christ, and Jay White against Claudio and John Moxley, and this was a little disappointing. I thought that it was good, but not like what you would expect given the names on it, and the circumstances and everything. It just kind of stayed in second gear and never moved past that. And like we talked about earlier, it was just a lot of get and heat. And the baby faces, I don't think ever really looked strong enough to kind of, even that out. And then your world title challenger was choked out in the middle of the ring. Cool, great. And it wasn't even that interference heavy. There was a little interference setting it up, but I would say that was more of a clean finish than not. So what the hell, guys?
Yeah, it kind of existed. The coolest part of the match was honestly the fact that Cope's theme song was sung by the entire arena. Like,
Yeah, that was good.
And it was organic. Like, we've all
Yeah.
been to AEW shows where Judas plays, everybody sings to it. The first couple times it was really cool, but then it just becomes part of the bit. And this just felt real. Like that song's on my gym playlist. It's been on there for a long ass time. I like that Alter Bridge album. It's really good butt rock. But I thought that was cool. And you know what? Now the only thing I'm worried about is we're going to get Cope win the title, and then Christian's going to cash in and screw him over one more time, which I could do without. But
Yeah.
Christian and Cope being the top of the world title picture just sounds like a seventh layer of hell from WCW Thunder. Feud over the TNT, I think that was perfect. Like, world
neither
title,
of them needs to be in the world title picture in 2025. For God's sake, I mean,
I'm fine with them being a challenger. I think they're both good, credible challengers. You can get, especially if like that All Out pay-per-view where Kenny beat Christian. That wasn't the main event of the show. It was Punk and Darby. Like,
yeah,
I think that's the perfect time for those guys to be challengers, where the main event isn't the world title, even though it goes on last. But to have your company built around these guys,
that's not a good move.
No, you're falling into really bad territory there.
And you have like a situation where you look at their big events that they have coming up for going into the summer and then into the fall. You have a baseball stadium that right now you're planning on selling a third of. And is it going to be attractive to people to go to this large show if it's going to be some form of Edge or Christian in the main event for this? It just does not seem to be like the right move when you have like the one thing that they can really control from like a revenue standpoint is how many people buy tickets to the show. And it does not feel like that you're putting your best foot forward for it. For me in this match, like, I think that there is a reality with Cope where in certain situations, and especially like through the entrance, him coming out, the sing along with that, you have the aura and you have like, okay, this feels like, all right, we have Adam Copeland in AEW and this feels kind of right. And then the match starts. And this was a situation where you add in Utah, and I don't know who you toss in on the babyface side. But if you add in like Dax Harwood, Mark Briscoe, you make this a 3-on-3. I think this match is a lot better because the situation that you have with the big AEW named Falls Count Anywhere matches, the best ones are the ones where your director's doing a good enough job that you're basically going from active moment to active moment to active moment to active moment, and there's not a whole lot of down. Yeah, there's chaos, and you're able to have the chaos because you have 3 or 4 or 5 people in these matches or matchups that you're able to rotate to, so that you're not waiting around with that. This match, I felt like there was so much waiting around, and a lot of that came from Cope. And it just felt...
And it never picked up steam.
Yeah, and it was to an active detriment to the match. And I think it's just like a reality of what you have with this kind of wrestler where Copeland, I mean, with his health history, does he want to be necessarily doing all these kinds of like crazy chaos brawls to the extent that there's an expectation, right? I mean...
the working standard.
Yeah, there's a working standard whenever they have had like these Anarchy in the Arena, Stadium Stampede, however you want to bundle them. There's a working standard, and this was not that.
Yeah. Speaking of falling short of a standard, Kazuchika Okada beat Buddy Matthews in 13 and a half minutes, essentially, with a Rainmaker after a quick kick to the dick. I think this match was pretty good. I don't want to make it sound like it sucked or anything, because that would be a lie. I went 3.5 on it. But when you got an Okada singles match on what is supposed to be a pretty big show, and the best you can say is it's pretty good, 3.5 stars, like, ain't great. That ain't what I think anyone expected. Now you can point to it being sub 20 minutes as like a reason that it wasn't as good as you'd expect just from seeing Okada and Matthews opposite each other on the card. I'm not blaming Matthews for this or anything. I just think that it underwhelmed, and it's a bummer. That's basically where I am. As insightful as that is, of just being like, oh, I wish the match was better. That's my big takeaway from it. Is it similarly didn't feel like it really stepped up, and I think that most of the is Okada really trying thing was washed away. I think by the Continental Classic, the run he had in that. I thought he had a bunch of really good matches in that. But we're kind of right back to it because this was a big show in Australia with a lot of people and a hot crowd, and 3.5 stars, man, with Okada. It's not right.
I have nothing to say on the match. I felt
Yeah.
nothing. It could have been really good. It wasn't. That's it.
Yeah.
They try to get over the fact that Buddy Matthews kicked out of the Rainmaker, which, like, the first time in AEW that someone kicked out of the Rainmaker, which feels like a thing that in past years definitely felt like that would be like, oh my God, someone kicked out of the Rainmaker. But
yeah, and it wasn't like that.
No. My reaction was, is he the first one to actually do that?
Yeah, I was like, surely this couldn't be right.
Right, yeah. But it's 3.5 star match. Like, essentially, it's a 3.5 star match when you're hoping for at least 4.25. So there's disappointment.
Oh yeah, like that should you see those names on there. You should have been like getting putting it on the notebook list like right away before it even starts. And instead, like you don't even get close really. So.
Yeah.
And that takes us to our main event, which was a much better than I feared it would be. Mariah May losing the AEW Women's World Championship to Toni Storm. Hopefully, this means that these two are done. I don't believe that at all from the finish, which was Toni winning with a roll-up. It felt like it was indecisive enough, or not decisive, but you know what I mean, like not a real conclusive finish, like a real clean this feud is over kind of finish. And so the problem is now, do we do this for a 16th month? I am exhausted with these two being the only people in the Women's World Championship picture. Like, yes, there were other matches that both had, but clearly the entire focus was on these two. And I didn't like the majority of the storyline. I thought it felt very hokey for large chunks of it, but at least we got this match, which was a really good 4-star match where they just drop bombs on each other, and I enjoyed it a lot.
I thought this was good. This is probably the best Mariah May has looked in AEW. They built this entire feud on hokey bullshit, and this match had no hokey bullshit.
And that's why it works.
I thought this was really good. I'm actually intrigued to see the direction they go. I think if they do one more match, which they probably will, that it needs to be the final match for a while, and they should do the whole Dragon Gate thing of just side-eyeing each other like, I hate you, bitch, for the next 2 years before they lock up again. And then it'll mean something. Or if they do like a women's Royal Rampage or something like that, or a gauntlet, and they come face to face, and like that's the only time that these two should really be in contact with each other for quite a while. Because I think how they got here was questionable quite often, but I thought they nailed the finish, or at least what is the finish at this point, and we'll see how they kind of move forward. But 3.5 stars, good stuff. Like, no complaints.
Yeah, and I feel like the shame of this feud and like this program, and now that we've kind of come to this point of, do you do the big gimmick rubber match and then disappear, or are we just done for a little bit? It is, I think, maybe Toni Storm is Mariah May's best like chemistry partner. Like throughout like the run, there were moments where like I enjoyed May versus Anna Jay. I thought that was a good series, but it felt like that this is the few times that Mariah May kind of takes off the limiter, and it feels like that that she is like this real dominant champion. It only has really felt in her title match when she beat Toni Storm at All in London last year, or in this one where they were like absolutely just going for it the entire time. And that's like the one thing that makes me want them to have a third match and hopefully do a cage, do gimmick, do however you are to make it into a real blow off at this point. Is I want to see them have another actual match. Like the storyline being what it is, like I could do completely without all of that. It just, if it's like, hey, we're 1-1 now and let's drop the bullshit, I can't deal with being on even plane with you. And that's something I would like to see. But the wild thing about this match and the wild thing about Grand Slam Australia, I'm going to steal something from Suit in his review that he said, this felt like really like, oh, this is how Battle of the Belt should have been. This show felt like a awesome 2.5 hour Saturday special. And
definitely,
this felt like the kind of title match that you would see on that old Clash of the Champions. Whereas we never really got that throughout Battle of the Belts. But
no, it's like they gave up on Battle of the Belts like immediately, and it's just one of the most bizarre things I've seen. Frankly, is just like you have the time, like you can at least try to make this something.
Right, but like no, this rocked, and I don't know, like because of how much they dominated the women's title picture, that do you go and do the rubber match and then go right into Owen season and build up like a brand new challenger, someone else to kind of palate cleanse the title? Or does, after this is all said or done, Tony quickly drops the belt to someone else and we're going off the races with something completely different? I don't know, but I feel like that there's a lot of questions on where to go to with this.
Yeah, I will note that going back through my ratings last year, the highest I had for a Mariah match was 4.5 stars at Wrestle Dream with Willow. So I do think that she's had a better match, but not very many. And speaking of, let's get Willow the strap. It's about time. We need to stop dicking around with this, and let's go. Let's just do the thing. All right, and that was the show. So I think overall, pretty solid show. I think like a 7 out of 10, 7.5 out of 10, around there. I think overall, can't complain about it for a Collision at all. But I think a little disappointing when you look at what was on paper versus what we got in a couple of cases, mainly on the men's side. So that leaves us now. I do want to talk about, there's a few more things with news, and I want to touch briefly on the Observer Awards if we have time, but I do have, okay. We'll get Tyler's thoughts on those, and then we'll finish up here. We'll finish up with his part of it. And then going back to the Great Wrestling Primer 2025 that I did, Mike and I couldn't quite make the scheduling work, but because he is a pervert, he watches the promotion referred to as GLEAT or GLEAT or GREAT or one of those. And he is going to talk about that. But let's get through the rest of the AEW news real quick. Just so everyone knows, what was taped on or in Australia along or outside of the Collision will air this Monday on Honor Club. So all those other matches that were announced will be there. AEW is seemingly not announcing pay-per-view dates until they have to, essentially, so that WWE may not be able to counterbook them. We'll get to a little discussion about that, I think. Rita Chatterton said that she was signed to a 1-year no-show contract with AEW recently that expired, I think, fairly recently. Rita is, of course, best known, sadly, for being an accuser of Vince McMahon of sexual abuse. And an update to last week's notes. Apparently, Elijah or Elias, whatever name he is using, I think Elijah, has not officially signed with AEW yet, but is still attached to the Righteous. Anything you guys want to add to those news bits we just ran through real quick?
The Rita Chatterton thing's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I saw people try to make it a bad thing, and I'm like, this is actually good. Why are we,
Yeah, and I feel like that the one thing that AEW has done really well has been, take care of certain figures who were not taken care of in the past. I mean, we've seen that every year with Dr. Martha Hart, and how we now get to see how awesome of a person she kind of is, and we never were kind of done like that with that. And I think that at least with Rita Chatterton getting like a no-show contract, I mean, that rocks.
Yeah, it does. I think that this is one of the best aspects of Tony Khan, frankly, as a person and as a business owner, is that he's willing to do good things for people that deserve it. And I think that Rita deserved something good from wrestling, just like Martha Hart did as well. Tyler, any other thoughts?
No, I have no other thoughts, but I'm really excited to I'm gonna bow out here because this is the primer is Fred's baby. It was a pleasure having you on, Mike. Always great to talk ball with you, and this is I'm glad that we have an outlet to do it because it's important that people are still talking ball.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for having me, and Tyler, we got to do this again soon sometime.
We absolutely will, gentlemen. I look forward to hearing about why Shima still rules.
Peace out, Tyler. Get the hell out of here. All right, Mike, it's time for business. First of all,
Yeah.
I lied to you. I lied to you about the GLEAT thing because we have one more thing, which is
All
I got to
right.
yell at you. I am doing a project on VOW where I try to watch basically a lot of wrestling. And this involves me trying to keep up with, as much as I can, every major promotion in the world. It is not easy. I am not doing a great job at it right now. I am going to have like a couple days next week where I just sit in my underwear and watch wrestling probably. We got to talk to you about your match recommendations for Dragon Gate because you're going to kill me if you keep this up. I'm trying to watch anything that like a reliable person says is 3.5 stars and better. And I'm not saying you're wrong about like these matches being good in Dragon Gate or anything.
Yeah.
But for January, you had 22 matches from Dragon Gate at 3.5 stars or better. And but you're going to kill me if you keep this up.
I feel like that the promotion, at least through, I have not watched the Hakata stuff from last week just because of how scheduling was with VoiceGate and everything. I knew that we would be doing that later, but I haven't done that. But it's been a real interesting time in the company. You've had a show that was so unique that it was the first time they've ever had a Cork and Hall of just one-on-one matches. And hey, if you're going to have one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, Masaki Mochizuki, in the ring with his son, and the two of them are just going to beat the crap out of each other, I kind of lose it a little bit. And I have to warn you, with Yuki Yoshioka coming back in March, it's not going to go down with that. But
I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die from watching too much wrestling, and I'm gonna come back and haunt you. Just so you know.
You know, at least you won't have the issue with everything from Dragon Gate making tape. You'll have that at least.
That's true. Just wanted to give you a hard time about that real quick.
No
but
worries.
yeah, so just to go back a little bit, you know, when I did the primer, I had a bunch of people on to talk about the promotion or promotions that they cover closely. And obviously, you know, you would have been a great candidate for Dragon Gate. But as I said, you are a pervert. So there was one promotion that went undiscussed, and for pretty good reasons, probably. And that promotion was GLEAT or GLEAT or Great. I asked everyone 3 questions when we did this thing.
Mhm.
Well, you know, 1, what was their 2024 like? 2, what's their 2025 looking like it'll be like? And 3, would you recommend watching this promotion? I have a special bonus question for you, Mike, which is
Okay.
what the hell is the name of this promotion?
So I always pronounce it GLEAT because it's the phonetical L and R situation is happening with that. And
The old Dave Meltzer kept writing Jushin Riger for like decade.
Roaring Elbow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I call it GLEAT, and it's just such a just for those, because it is just like one of those promotions that just to give like a little quick thing about it. GLEAT was founded in 2021 as kind of this bin of parts from other promotions. You had the remainder of Wrestle One that closed up during the pandemic. You had parts of Shima's OWE. You had Kiyoshi Tamura, former MMA and shoot fighting style. And then you had, of all people in the style, Wrong Guy was a part of this to start off with. And you've combined those those like disparate parts, and that's the promotion that you get. And at least for me, when I like look at it, I'm always looking at it from like the Dragon System perspective. But I have to be honest, part of my insistence of keeping up with the promotion, that there's enough like parts that have charm that give me time. But is it worth anyone else's time? I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, so GLEAT, 2024, how did that go for them?
It's been a rough kind of go for GLEAT. They had a couple of large venue shows. Traditionally, their promotion is based around Tokyo Dome City Hall, and that's a venue that is not really run that much. It's a part of the greater Korakuen Tokyo Dome area in Tokyo, but it's known for being kind of an expensive venue, which is kind of the story about GLEAT. GLEAT brings in a lot of names and a lot of people just to work GLEAT, such as Parker Boudreaux has been a constant presence in GLEAT over the last few times. MXM Collection, their first Japan date was flying in, beating up a bunch of GLEAT kids and flying home. And that is overall kind of the situation with the promotion. It's not really gaining any sort of steam. There are two real champions that are worth talking about. You had the G-Rex Championship and you had the Ledet UWF Championship. And the Ledet 20 UWF Championship very quickly went to Kazuhiko Nakajima, who landed in this promotion kind of as he is a name and he's kind of known as a difficult property within Japanese pro wrestling. And this is kind of the last stop for those kind of people with that. And the Ledet UWF stuff does not draw. Fred never draws. They participated in the Bloodsport Bushido show at Sumo Hall last year, the one that Josh Barnett did. They did not really announce attendance for that show, but it's the first time that I have ever seen Sumo Hall, including Tokyo Joshi shows, which never really draw that great, that they had to completely have the arena, and then they got about 800 people there. So does not do great business, has a corporate owner. Their G-Rex champion for most of last year was Hayato Tamura, who was a big homegrown guy who finally knocked off T-Hawk, a name that people maybe have heard. And his title run then kind of flamed out. He was not really rising to the expectations that one would expect. Step up Soma Watanabe, former Wrestle One guy, very much one of the many frustrating parts of GLEAT, that you have these great younger wrestlers and they just don't necessarily get be put in position or have the kind of matches that really, one, draw, or two, really build for them. So Tamura fails. He drops the belt to Watanabe. Watanabe then immediately drops the belt to Kaito Ishida. So not a lot of coherence here. If you want to know the real situation about how befuddling this promotion is, folks, there's going to be a show coming up on the 22nd. It is their biggest show so far of the year. It's Kaito Ishida versus Takahiro Yamamura for that belt. And that's a big Dragon System feud and situation that's been going on for 11 years. It will probably draw about 700 people, Fred. No one's going to go to it. On the undercard, they are flying Leo Rush over to Japan to face El Lindemann. Everyone loves El Lindemann. El Lindemann is the one jewel in GLEAT that if someone asks me what you should watch in GLEAT, it's usually around you should watch El Lindemann. What he's involved in is great. So they're flying him in, Fred, to do a Into the G Rush title match. This new great idea that they have. 7-minute match. That's a time limit on this match. So Leo Rush is being flown into Japan
7-minute time limit
for a 7-minute time limit match in Korakuen Hall. So
wow,
it's a befuddling promotion, but I have made it a personal oath that someone has to testify about it. But it's
question: why you?
Because when I became a Dragon Gate fan back in 2006 and 2007, Jay Church had a lovely website, said I Heart Dragon Gate, I Heart DG, that he would talk about places like El Dorado and Secret Base. And I never got to see those because I was not paying for tape trading in college. So now that there is kind of the splitter promotion, I started this really back in 2018 when the Strong Hearts left Dragon Gate. I kind of was I want to keep my eye on these guys. Because Jay did a great job back then chronicling the stuff. It's someone's going to have some sort of chronicle of what's going on with these guys. And it's just devolved over 6 years into now watching and being one of, like, I don't know, at least 30 other people think GLEAT is as bad as I am. I do. So it's not very many people follow it, but I feel like it's important that someone who has a platform and has an expertise within the Dragon system at least keep an interest and keep tabs on. Really, a lot of people that, at least for Dragon Gate viewers, you have people like Kaito Ishida, El Lindemann, and even like SB Kento and Takuma Fujiwara, who you start watching them as rookies and they leave. And sometimes when people leave the Dragon system, you get Shingo Takagi, where like they have their best case scenario. They go become IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. And sometimes you get Akira Tozawa's, who you don't see ever again. And you're just like, oh, I hope he's doing well. So it's a really conflicted existence covering this promotion, Fred.
Yeah, you've done it to yourself. All right,
Oh.
so
Completely to myself.
how would you describe their 2024 in general?
A lot of the same. They did tie themselves to Kota Ibushi, which they have one of his trainees who's now part of the promotion, Ryo Ataka. And the issue that they've had was that nothing really drew so much. And then they decided to do the one thing that when a promotion does this, you can tell that someone's finally looking at the books. It used to be that all of GLEAT was up for free on YouTube. Now there's a paywall.
Yes.
And if that's happening, that tells you things aren't good. So it was not a strong year. It was a situation where I look at that promotion and I think they will continue because of the situations with Ladette. They have the most expensive tickets in all pro wrestling. It's like, so they ran Edion Reno Osaka last year, the big one, Bodymaker, right? The big room that like New Japan, Dragon Gate, all the big promotions will run that room. And they run it at a time where they drew about, it was not a good crowd for them. I will pull up the number for this. They charged 3 times the amount that New Japan and Dragon Gate do for front row tickets.
Gutsy.
So when you do that, you're able to, and you have a fan base of people who've been following certain wrestlers for almost 30 years, Fred, you can get those tickets sold. So at least for me, I look at this promotion as long as you have figures like Shima around and you have figures like Minoru Tanaka and even Kazuhiko Nakajima, there will be like high grade kind of fan supporters with that Edion Arena Osaka show. 1,000 people in the big room. It was awful. And it was Ricochet's first match back in Japan was on this show. It was the one where Shima came out and shaved his head and tried to look like Ricochet and wore like the same gear. It was really weird. Goodness. It's a promotion that has like the weirdest vibes whatsoever. That match happened after the Rascals beat up Kaito Ishida and Tetsuya Izuchi. They won the G Infinity tag team belts. Then they never defended it and vacated them. It's cool. It's a real cool promotion. Let me tell you that.
So you mentioned Shima, of course, the Dragon Gate legend, who left that company under great circumstances. Please don't investigate that further. Yeah, of course, the rest of Strong Hearts with him. And you have, as you mentioned, Kota Ibushi and the fake Inoki guy who's Katsuhiko Nakajima. And you have the very random American fly-ins. Any other names that are worth making note of from GLEAT at this point in time?
Yeah, it's really kind of tough. So the persons that will be pushing this promotion going forward, I think you look at a guy, Ryo Ataka. He's a former K1 kickboxer. His wife was an AKB48. It's so like he has like certain levels of cachet, and he was the first trainee of the Ibushi Wrestling Institute. So he is someone he's older with it. He is bigger, but it does seem like that there seems to be like enough of an undercurrent with him that he is worth kind of checking out with that. Elsewhere, you also have people like former Dragon Gate wrestlers, the Tokyo Bad Boys, who are the former SB Kento and Takuma Fujiwara. They formed a trio now with one of my favorite guys on the roster. He goes by Nobu-san now, but he is the previous Czech Shimatani, who is basically 5'3", completely jacked and charismatic as heck. So you have these guys there that are like really promising, but then they have to go get booked into doing like UWFI matches against Minoru Tanaka, and sometimes things go really bad there. So you have that, and then of course there's always Takahiro Yamamura. He is the former Dragon Gate wrestler who at one point in time would have been the next up ace that at least CIMA was really behind. He broke his neck in 2017, came back to wrestling in 2019 as a part of Strong Hearts and Wrestle 1, hurt his neck again, was out of wrestling up until actually at the New Year's Eve GLEAT show of 2023. And it's been real difficult for me with him because this was a guy who, I have to put my own personal like biases and opinion aside, that this is a guy who for a long time when he came back to GLEAT, I was like, he should not be wrestling. This is a really disgusting kind of situation. But he's really become not necessarily the star that we thought he would be in Dragon Gate, but he kind of is CIMA's last ace up the sleeve. He is his last like major kind of protege from that system. And then it's the big man himself. I think CIMA is someone that wrestling is better when CIMA's involved. His in-ring is getting kind of rough. So it will be, people should keep an eye on necessarily. I don't know. I think maybe he is someone that within the next 12 months, I would not be surprised to hear a retirement coming. So it's probably, if you're someone who, I mean, CIMA got in the Hall of Fame last year. So like he's having like his victory lap, I feel like right now that he's still kind of going. But
is there any indication that he actually cared about that? I'm just entirely curious.
You know,
did the news get to him or anything, or is
anything obvious? He knows.
Yeah, okay.
But he didn't say anything. Like CIMA's one of the most critically online people. He knows that he's an observer Hall of Fame. But it was wild that he didn't really note it. Like you saw like how like Sari like mentioned like
she said a thing about doing well in the awards and everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But he's kind of weird. He's an interesting guy. Like who's to say what the next step will be from CIMA if something happens to GLEAT and it closes up? He might end up down in Uganda with soft ground trying to kick stuff up there.
Oh, he went there, right? Didn't he?
Yeah. He took Czech Shimatani down there for it, and he gave them all of his like Dragon Gate era gear. So like for like a period before soft ground became canceled and all the expose about the guy running scams, you would see clips of random guys. Like one of the guys would be like wearing CIMA's gear from like Blood Generation, and the other one's like wearing like another set of gear. And I'm sitting over here going, you know, like it's great that he like went to Uganda, brought them wrestling gear and like that, but why wouldn't you give up like your OWE gear or your GLEAT gear? You could probably make some good money off of Blood Generation CIMA pair of tights, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
One has to see with him. I've committed myself to this world where I need to like keep an eye on all the folks who leave the Dragon system, and at least for right now, GLEAT is a nice holding pot of a lot of them.
So 2025. Well, actually, before I even ask you that, do you? I guess what I want to ask is, the YouTube channel. How much is that? Are they asking a month?
It is at this time. Let me see what they have when I post it up there. So they only have everything from their last big show of last year. They only have 5 shows up there. Let me see what happens if I try to cancel my membership, and it'll tell me what happens with it. Learn more about the memberships. This
is actually a plot to make my cancel a subscription and stop watching GLEAT. This is an intervention.
Rich and Case would be probably writing you a thank you note for that. Let me see what happens when I cancel it. I actually did cancel it, so I'm going to sign back up.
I did it.
But I am signing right back.
No, don't. You don't have to do that.
It's $9 essentially. $9.
Okay. All right, so that's not that much. I was expecting it to be like 15 and be like,
Oh no, this is not a Dragon Gate network situation where they have the most expensive network and they only have 3 shows that are going to air in March. Fortunately, it's not that bad.
Yeah. So, okay, so 2025, like, what do you think
Yeah.
the big storylines are going to be coming out of this year?
It's going to be a situation where they're running more and more shows, but not all of them are actually going to be televised. They have house shows. So I am right now looking at their schedule through June. They're going to be doing they used to do about 2 shows a month. They're going up to 3 to 4, but only 3 of them are going to be on TV. But the situation with them is probably going to still kind of continue to tread water. I feel like they're burning Kaito Ishida versus Takahiro Yamamura in Cork and Hall, which I think that was like their match that they could have built for one of their bigger venues, but that's not the case. So I feel like that they have a dojo that has only produced one person who tore his ACL like right afterwards.
Oh,
so
geez.
it's a promotion that if you did not have the fact that very clearly there is a group that wants to have this promotion happen, essentially, that if this was a promotion that was, right, yeah, they're steadfast in happening. So everyone around the Dragon system kind of looks and says, is this the year that GLEAT breaks down and stops? No, I think GLEAT kind of becomes the same thing. No, the young guys kind of aren't ever getting over too much. It's a real kind of weird situation. My one kind of hope a little bit is that the one thing that I would hope they do is they kind of knock off the Ladette UWFI stuff, because other than as a way to give Kazuhiko Nakajima a title and go around, it's been a situation where the shows draw a lot worse. They've tried an MMA show that did awful, and it's a situation where you have a promotion that has so many cooks in the kitchen that I want to see one of the cooks somehow bow out so you could actually see a coherent promotion going forward. So that's my hope in 2025 is either Shima or Kiyoshi Tamura kind of back off and we get to see one person's vision or the others and just not cross the streams anymore. That's my hope for 2025.
If only we could all be so lucky, I guess. So the real question I'll come down to, and if we've left anything out that you want to talk about with GLEAT, is would you advise someone watching this promotion in 2025?
It's very hard to. If I did not
before you answer, I do want to note that even Cubs fan, when I asked him that about AAA, gave a positive answer about the promotion. He was very selective in what he said.
Yeah.
But he did say that if you like, kind of the big show feeling, that you may like it. So just to set you up here properly. Would you, I'll repeat the question.
I'm trying to think of my most positive spin I'm going to give you.
Which is not a push for you to be positive, but I'm just saying that even AAA got a positive answer.
If you're someone who needs more UWFI matches in your life, GLEAT is a good venue for that. If you're someone who was a fan of Dragon Gate of certain times over the last 6 to 7 years, and you have a connection to your T-Hawks, to your El Lindemann, to your Kaito Ishidas, even down to your Takuma Fujiwaras, it's worth following them. I mean, it's the outside of the Tokyo Bad Boys in AAA, Strong Hearts don't work super much or the former Strong Hearts that no longer exist, but T-Hawk and El Lindemann kind of have kept their work down to just GLEAT. Kaito Ishida only works GLEAT. If you want to follow these guys, this is the place where you can do so. So I don't know if that's necessarily positive as it is purely factual as an answer. And if you're someone like me who always finds CIMA and his outlook towards pro wrestling important. It's important that there is an outlet for someone like CIMA, someone who has been one of the biggest innovators of his generation. And I say with like a full chest, the best talent evaluator and scout of his generation. There should be a place for someone like that within pro wrestling. And it should be a place where they are able to really kind of show their abilities, right? Like you want to, wrestling needs to have a place for someone like CIMA, essentially, and for better and for worse. And if that holding cell right now is GLEAT, then that's a good place for him. And that's a reason why GLEAT should be followed. If you're someone who, for better or for worse, you believe in CIMAism, it's your venue to do so.
Well, anything else that you want to talk about with GLEAT, since this is your outlet for your this peccadillo you have?
Because I'll be like, well, Case, there was this GLEAT show that was happening in front of 200 people and 200 people in Osaka that we could talk about. And he's like, no, I don't ever want to do that. And now they go behind the paywall and Case goes, I'm not paying for that. I'm not going to do that. Unless you can find a way to rip me that show, I'm not going to spend my time on that. But yeah, it's an interesting promotion. If you're someone that likes interesting promotions, it is worth kind of checking out. It is, even though I think it has too many cooks in the kitchen and you're too old of a promotion to still really be figuring this out in that way, Fred. Like AEW, I mean, we've seen how it's changed over 5 years. GLEAT's still kind of figuring themselves out, and I find that kind of stuff interesting. I do like doing that. Okay. But I have had like one match above 3.25 stars this year from GLEAT, and it's an elimination match. So what have you? I mean, like that's what's there for, really. Yeah, I know. I'm sick.
Oh, Mike. Well, everyone, that's Mike. Those are the decisions he's made. Mike, let's get some plugs in for you. So for your go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I know that
thanks for coming on. Thanks for letting me, give you a hard time over this the GLEAT thing. But
hey, the rest of my viewing patterns outside of wrestling shouldn't be applauded either. Like how did I spend my Valentine's Day? We watched as much of Love Is Blind premiere as we could. So I mean, we could talk about my tastes in a lot of things, but if you want to listen to me talk about things that are in good taste, Open the Voice Gate has been the leading English source of Dragon Gate and Greater Dragon System reviews, news, interviews. We had Ho Ho Loon, which first-time guest, came on, talk about Dragon Gate USA returning in Vegas, and we're going to have a presence in Vegas coming up for those shows. We released it was a whole lot of fun. Like Ho Ho is one of those people who I really want to be able to sit down and be like, you are one of the most fascinating people in wrestling. Like people don't really get how cool Ho Ho Loon is and what he's been able to accomplish so far in his life. But he was gracious enough to stop by with us to talk about that. We'll have more stuff in Vegas coming up. We will probably need to talk to Case about scheduling. We have a new series that we're going to kick off next month that will be very much it. If you're someone who is used to kind of the things that Case and I get really, really into, you will have a good time with our new series. I don't know how much I'm allowed to really tag and tease it too much, but Open the Voice Gate, you can check me out there on social media at Open Voice Gate on both Twitter and Blue Sky. I'm at Fujiheya on Twitter. I'm at Spears Ovations on Blue Sky, and basically everything else. If you search Spears Ovations, you'll find me. But yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Mike, thank you very much for coming on. It was a great time. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. And everyone check out Open the Voice Gate and do check out Dragon Gate. It is a very good promotion right now, even if it's entirely too many matches for me to watch from January. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks.
My name is Tyler Fornes, and I am one of the co-hosts of the Good, the Bad, and the Hungee AEW podcast here on the Voice of Wrestling Podcasting Network. We take a broad scope approach to the world of All Elite Wrestling and the entire universe of Tony Khan. We talk about the big matches, the big stars, the promos, the storylines. And we also look at it from a big picture perspective. How are things going to change over the course of the next 10 years with AEW still in the picture? How are companies like WWE going to adapt and adjust to AEW? Are they going to be a similar way like they did with WCW in the late 1990s? Will there be a counterpunch? We talk about all of that and more on The Good, The Bad, and The Hungee every week on the Voices of Wrestling Network.